Hi, everyone. I'm Alexis Voss, and welcome back to Your Black Lobbyist podcast. Okay, let's get into it. Today, we're going to definitely talk about, what's kind of looming in the conversations that are around the partial government shutdown. I know just from the recent government shutdown towards, around November, December 2025, that really shook everybody and it shook the nation, and a lot of people were without jobs for 43 days. A lot of people were without income, were without government assistance for literally a month and some change. And so I know when people hear a partial government shutdown, they're kind of like, well, what is that? How does this impact me? Is my job impacted again? Or am I going to be able to get, paid? Am I going to have a furlough? Am I going to be able to receive assistance? Are the national parks going to be open? All of these questions I'm going to hopefully try to answer for you today. And also hopefully with all of that, minimize the fear of the words shutdown, right? Now that we experienced, one last year. Okay, so what is a partial government shutdown? And pretty much it's essentially a funding disagreement playing out in real time, if you want to really chalk it up. Right now, on the federal side, the House and the Senate is having, again, disagreements on appropriations. And appropriations is pretty much, again, funding for the government, funding for different agencies or government funded agencies, which of course trickle down to state and local entities as well. And so right now, the difference between this government shutdown and the government shutdown from 2025 is that this is not going to impact all of the government agencies. So if you are a federal worker, if you are receiving or on government assistance, this one may not impact you. And so kind of talking through what this government shutdown means and why it's considered a partial one. And so certain agencies, like I mentioned, will continue to operate. Others will pause or limit services. The issue right now is that the House and the Senate are having a disagreement on the appropriations funding for, right now, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. And under DHS is, of course, ICE. I'm pretty sure everybody who is listening is very, very familiar of ICE, especially since ICE has recently been in the headline news lately, especially in Minnesota. And a lot has been going on with the agency of ICE, and just how the public opinion is really split, right? You're seeing a lot of people that are not in agreement whatsoever of the entity whatsoever and should be dismantled. And some people are on the other extreme saying how we should uphold and uplift our law enforcement. And then, of course, you have those in the middle where they're just saying, well, there's nothing wrong with having ICE. It's just that there needs to be some type of boundaries, or there needs to be some kind of guardrails, right? So that people don't feel unsafe in the streets, or when ICE is around, people don't feel unsafe. And so right now, I think the Senate has approved the appropriations funding, but right now the House currently is having some back and forth debate about, what that, the language of the bill and what's going to be appropriated into the DHS, right? And I do think, from a perspective that not everybody looks from, is that ICE is not the only agency under Department of Homeland Security, right? So it's not always logical, right, to dismantle and get rid of Department of Homeland Security. Like, America needs DHS, right, in order to operate and to be able to function. And there's other entities like TSA, right? Like when you are going to the airport and you want to go through safely and securely, that is funded under DHS. So I think when we are having these conversations and these debates, we just want to make sure that we're not looking at it from a keyhole, right, from one-sided perspective, and that we're looking at from a general perspective. And when we're having conversations, not to be on the extreme, right, but to also make sure we're having thoughtful conversations that is looking at a full and whole perspective and not from a one-sided perspective on both sides. However you vote, however you agree or view ICE or view what's going on, I think when we're viewing things, we have to look at it from a general whole perspective and how this not only impacts you or certain groups of people, but how it may impact, honestly, everybody. And dismantling DHS or not giving them as much funding can definitely see major shifts in airline and TSA operations, and also operations in other entities as well. That is up under the DHS, or the Department of Homeland Security, I'm sorry. And so I know that when, again, we're having these conversations, you're trying to figure out, well, why does this matter? Again, it definitely matters because this impacts, right, the partial government shutdown impacts federal employees and contractors. Again, if you're employed by the government, the federal government, and you're contracted through the federal government, this impacts you. It could delay services that people rely on. It creates uncertainty for families and local economies. And it shows how decisions at the top trickle down into, kitchen table conversations, just kitchen table, right? When we have these conversations, we need to be, again, realistic on how this, again, is impacting not only just like how it may or may not impact you, but how it impacts everybody. And I will also mention that with the partial government shutdown, this does not impact everyone like how it did the first government shutdown. So if you are a TSA agent or work under TSA or at the airport, this will impact you, right? Because like I mentioned, TSA is under Department of Homeland Security. But this shouldn't impact national parks. So national parks should remain open. This shouldn't impact Medicaid or Medicare, distribution or benefits. This should not impact anything regarding food stamps, and this definitely should not impact anything regarding receiving Social Security if you receive Social Security checks. I believe in the first government shutdown that was already appropriated. That funding was already allotted to certain and most agencies. So right now, like I said, a lot of the impact is coming from, or a lot of the conversations is coming from more of DHS funding and other entities that are connected to the Department of Homeland Security. So a lot of people should be in the clear, but I will also say make sure you connect with your home-based entity or organization to make sure that this does not impact you, right? So if you work for the Postal Service, I believe this should not impact you, but of course, always double checking and making sure, because decisions, again, are always coming from the top and trickling downward. So I always will just refer to that just to make sure you are, out of the way. But because mostly TSA will be an impacted, meaning they, while this government or this partial government shutdown is happening, they are not receiving payment. You will probably see, again, like we saw before, workforce shortages from the airport, the airlines, and of course, longer waits and delays, right? The same way you ain't working for free, most people are not going to be working for free either. And even if they don't want to, they probably can't afford to, right? So, I just kind of wanted to give you that current watch. Of course, things are coming in and changing, honestly, every week, if not every day. So this update may, be subsided by then, by the time this airs, or even we may be in a different situation. But just wanting to kind of dismantle the fear and also not give you misinformation as well, as you are, trying to stay informed and be up to date on what's happening. So with everything going on, I can definitely understand how things may feel worrisome, or you have doubt, or you don't know if you're going to receive your next paycheck or if you're going to even receive assistance. But rest assured, this partial government shutdown should not impact most Americans like how it did in 2025. But just a reminder into awareness, right? And as we shift the conversation actually into that, even when it feels distant, these moments shape everyday stability in life. And so when we're having these conversations, when we're seeing what's happening in America or in the world, we have to remember that it's not too far from home. And when we all start to realize that this impacts all of us compared to only certain groups of people or certain people, we'll be better off with learning from our mistakes and learning how to maneuver as one, right? Our system, our party system was not built or created to operate without each other, right? So in the event, if that was the case, then the Senate wouldn't need the House, and the House wouldn't need the Senate to pass laws and and bills and legislation. The same way the executive branch relies on the legislative branch, and the legislative branch relies on the judicial branch, and they all rely on each other, right? And so our system was not built for these extremist ideologies and perspectives. That's why a lot of stuff is happening where we feel like nothing's happening, nothing's getting done. And so I just again encourage you to be aware, even if you haven't fully fleshed out your ideas and your thoughts, be aware of what's happening in your area, be aware what's happening in the world, and make sure you are abreast and not influenced, right? Knowing the difference. And so I would definitely say with that, pay attention to deadlines, right? Budget deadlines. And that's something easily accessible. Remember that elected officials are public servants, right? So a lot of this information is public. It's not private. It's not, nothing that no one can access as long as they have, internet. I will say that you can go on the website, check out to see when the appropriation deadlines are, so then you can know in advance if this is going to be an issue if they don't agree, right? How am I going to properly prepare? Also, pay attention to who is negotiating and how. I think, again, going back into the perspective, into the argument that one side is this, one side is that, when it's like, pay attention to, again, how people are interacting, how people are speaking, and what conversations are being held. I think we get so locked into the partisan idea of things that we don't, again, open up ourselves to recognize that this actually is not a Democratic or a Democrat and a Republican issue. This is also a me issue, whether I'm a Democrat or Republican or independent, right? All of this impacts you, whether you have Democratic leadership or Republican leadership, whether you have on the federal side, the state side, or the local side. It does not matter, because at the end of the day, it still impacts you regardless of how you vote. And that's not a push for you to not vote, right? I think it's just to be aware that when we are working together as one, we have to be mindful of getting so roped into the politics and things that we forget that this impacts real people. And it's not too far from us. And I will just say also too, noticing patterns, not personalities. Again, you see people on camera and they're charismatic and they're passionate and they're saying this person and that person and they're pointing fingers, but we have to get outside of the personality of a person, and get into the fact that there is a pattern in how they are leading a country, a state, a local municipality. We have to start holding our leaders and those that we put in office accountable. And not just because they're good looking, not because they're a certain skin tone or color, not because of these superficial things. We actually have to see what is the pattern. What did they say they were going to do, and hold them accountable, right? And don't vote for somebody that has a pattern of disrupting your way of life. So I think it's one of those situations where we can't get so roped into that. You're not going to like everybody. You're not going to agree with everybody, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, we need to figure out, again, how are we going to make this world a better, safer, and hopefully an affordable place to live. And so you don't need to track every deadline. You just need to understand what's decided and who it affects. Just so, again, you can better prepare for things in times like this, like when there's partial government shutdowns. The next one later, you're getting a call from your manager or your boss, and they're just like, yeah, you got to pack up because we cannot, the government shut down. And you're like, I don't know why. So staying informed is super, super imperative and being aware about it. I want to also talk about why early awareness is important. When people understand systems and things that's happening in politics early, you are able to ask better questions. You are able to engage more confidently. You are able to avoid panic-driven reactions, and you're able to build upon your civics, and you're building upon it calmly and not through fear because you're in the thick of it already. Awareness is preparation. Preparation is power. And so when you're able to be on top of this stuff early, it allows you to be able to prepare. And not necessarily always for the worst. You can prepare for when things are going well and right? When you know about tax incentives in your local or state area, if you're a business owner, you're able to prepare your business for the next fiscal year and set your business up for success because you're able to get things that you didn't even know were offered to you and available to you. If you know that this tax credit for people who are, mothers or parents for their children, or there's a tax credit for those that are trying to put their children in daycare, that sets you up for success. So it doesn't always have to be on this macro level where, something big has to happen. Being informed, being aware helps you to be able to prepare for either the worst possible scenario or the best possible scenario. And all of preparation is just setting you up for success in either one of those situations. So don't look at it as like a doomsday. Look at it from a perspective that I am setting myself up to be the best version of myself. I'm setting my family up to operate in this either crisis or time. And I'm also setting myself up to be able to function and live in this world that I'm in, right? Or in the state and area that I'm in. So again, preparation and awareness doesn't always necessarily reflect a doomsday. It's just always something that is good to know and good to be able to lean on so that you're, again, not easily influenced by a good face and a personality, but you're influenced and you're influenced by your civic liberty and educating yourself, researching, and knowing your rights. And so the biggest thing I try to encourage everyone listening is research, research, research. Read, read, read. Educating yourself is going to be your biggest asset. My mom always told me no one can take my education away from me. And I think we always look at education as a tangible thing. Education doesn't mean how many degrees you have. It doesn't mean how many certifications you received. Education is what's up here. No one can take that away from me. And so when I educate myself, I arm myself to be able to function in a world or function in a society that either is not operating its best or maybe operating in its best. But regardless, I know how to maneuver through life. And I'm not stuck in a situation where things like this are happening and I have to now react out of fear because I found out too late. So, I always just try to drive that home to make sure you are aware of what's happening and not to, again, influence you. My personal beliefs has nothing to do with me just giving you the facts of what's going on. And so, again, if you don't believe or like what I said, that's perfectly fine. I always love a good debate, but I always encourage people to read for themselves, research for themselves, and figure it out. I hope that you have enjoyed or learned something from this What to Watch series. I'll definitely try to add more of these into the podcast just so I can keep you abreast again of what's happening, what's going on, and how does it impact you. This season, we will continue to have more conversations like this, slow down the political conversations, add clarity where there's confusion, and hopefully center understanding under or over the outrage. So I definitely want to make this an ongoing segment of what to watch, again, keeping you informed of what's going on. And so throughout this season, we'll keep revisiting what's happening, why it matters, so engagement feels grounded and not stressful. I don't want to over-inundate you with a bunch of information and too much political jargon, but hopefully this was something that was palatable and that you were able to understand of what's going on in your area. And so you don't have to be an expert to be engaged. You just have to be aware of the moment you're living in. I thank you so much for following me and being on this journey with me. And so please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And definitely until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.